I wanted to do a little review of what we did last week as we move into week 3, just to catch you up on where we're at. A few housekeeping things. First of all, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to record the Saturday review session that we had on WebEx. Hamlin was undergoing a upgrade to WebEx somehow, so I wasn't able to use my own account and had to use Hamlin's larger account, which was full, so I wasn't able to record it. Again, I apologize for that. I'd like to do our next review session in a week and a half, Saturday, October 10th. I'm aware that a good number of you, maybe 7 or 8 of you, were able to come at the 11 to 12 time. I think what I'll do is send out a poll, though, to see if there's another time during that day that's better. I'm teaching on campus in the afternoon, so we'll probably look at either earlier in the morning or later on in the afternoon. So I'll send that out to you soon. Let me know what works for you, and we'll just sort of go with what seems to work for the majority. Another housekeeping piece is about the in the classroom activities. I think there's been some confusion about a variety of things around those. First of all, the person who has that role, your job is to really just find an activity that your group will then discuss in the discussion area and modify. So you don't have to do all the modifications. You just find an activity that seems interesting online, post it to your group's discussion area, encourage people to discuss. But then what I would like you to do, again, as the in the classroom coordinator, is to then, after your group has done some modifications, take those ideas and post them into the Google Doc. There's a link to that on the left-hand side of Blackboard. It's called In the Classroom Activities, I think. And then you can post your group's ideas in that Google Doc. I've done that as a Google Doc because I think you will only have access to the Blackboard course up until maybe 3 months after the course is done, and I'd like you to have something that you can access after that, and Google Docs allows you to do that. So it's kind of a repository for all the good ideas that you're coming up with. Quiz 1 is due, you've handed that in, and I will start grading that. Hope to get that done by, I'll try and get that done by the end of Friday of this week. So keep your eyes open to the My Grades, or perhaps it's called assignments in your view, so that you can see how you're doing on that. Just a reminder too that I'd like you to submit your assignments by uploading them into that assignments area of Blackboard rather than emailing them to me. A couple of things that came up in your discussions in week 2 that I just wanted to highlight for everyone. Group 1 started a really nice list of ways to increase learner speaking time based on Chapter 3, one of the discussion questions of Chapter 3 in Building Academic Language in Zweer's book. So I just think they did a really nice job of thinking of ways to do that, including think, pair, shares, using popsicle sticks to be sure to call on all students. Anyway, I'll let you browse through the rest of that list, or go to their discussion site to see that themselves too. So nice ideas there. Group 2 also considered the idea of, again, conversations. They had a nice dialogue about Zweer's idea of co-shaping conversations, and he had mentioned in Building Academic Language the idea of recasting, so restating what students are saying as a way to both correct them and kind of keep the conversation going. But the feeling in Group 2 was that recasts are pretty largely not helpful to learning and can sometimes be really distracting. It means that the teacher is taking over some of the voice in the classroom. So again, nice conversations around that. There was also some discussion about are there times that silence in the classroom is helpful, and maybe particularly silence on the teacher's part. I thought that was a very provocative question to be thinking about. And it's got me thinking about how much I should or shouldn't participate in your conversations in the discussion board too. So I think I've tended to do some recasting, and anyway, it's got me rethinking what my role might be. So thanks, Group 2, for that discussion. In Group 3, a question that Michael brought up was, again, I found really interesting. He asked about, I'm going to let you read his question on your own, but the gist of his question is, do students need to have some grammar background before we can start looking at grammar in complex texts? So he says, I feel that oftentimes the grammatical features of academic texts are complex or involve higher order thinking and abstract concepts. So if the students are not prepared already with a comprehensive toolbox, I missed the end of that quote, that it can be hard for them. I think this is a great question, Michael, and I think I really appreciate that you are thinking about how functional grammar works versus more traditional grammar and bringing up some of these questions. You're not the only one, I'm sure, who has these questions. For me, a few of the bottom lines are that grammar needs to be learned in context. We just can't teach students decontextualized, isolated bits of grammar and expect them to, expect it to stick with them. We also remember from a systemic functional grammar perspective that the grammar choices we make will change depending on the genre and on the context. On the register. So again, that really argues for teaching the grammar in context. We can't just teach a verb tense by itself and say this is the meaning of the verb tense, because the function of that verb tense changes from genre to genre, from register to register. I think certainly the context, the text in this case, I think the academic texts that Michael's talking about, they certainly need to be comprehensible or to be scaffolded so that they're comprehensible for learners before we can use them as a jumping off point for grammar. So yes, learners certainly need to have a certain understanding of the text before we start addressing the grammar in it, or in parallel to us addressing the grammar in it. Finally, there was an interesting Scott Thornbury video where he talks about the grammar syllabus that I think is related to this point. So I'll put that link below this video. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that you've done in the wiki. I think that's gone really well this week. I have finished my comments in your wiki, so please go in there and see if there's anything that you have questions about. I think at this point, if you have a question, why don't you email it to me, just so that I don't miss that question. Few things that came up, particularly around objects, direct objects and indirect objects. There was the activity that you did where you had a number of sentences and you needed to decide, are there any objects in here? So is it a transitive sentence or an intransitive sentence? Transitive meaning, does it have a direct object? And then if there is a direct object, is there an indirect object too? So some things to keep in mind. Not every sentence will have objects. We have plenty of sentences that have no direct objects, no indirect objects. Another piece is that indirect objects are less common than direct objects. So if a sentence has a direct object, it won't automatically have an indirect object. Just again, I think there might be some confusion around that. Also, very few verbs can take only an indirect object without a direct object too. The vast majority of sentences, like 90-some% of sentences that have an indirect object, will also have a direct object. There are a few. We can say, for example, tell me the news. In that sentence, me is the indirect object, the news is the direct object. So we can say, tell what? Tell the news. Tell the news to whom? To me. So me is the indirect object. We can also say it without a direct object, though, just tell me. The idea here, though, is that there's an implied direct object. Both the person that I'm talking to, that I'm making this request of, and we both know what the thing is that I'd like to be told. Finally, I think there was a little bit of confusion between circumstances and indirect objects. We haven't looked at circumstances in detail yet. Um, you saw just a little bit of them in grammar and meaning and uh, the teacher's ANGC, a new grammar companion. Um, I think what's confusing about them is that indirect objects sometimes have a to with them, but not every to construction is going to be an indirect object. We've got an example here. I gave a gift to Maya. Here, to Maya is an indirect object. I gave a gift, in direct object. To whom? To Maya. We have another sentence though. I ran to the store. In this case, to the store is a circumstance. Remember, circumstances show us where, when, how, and why. So in this case, this circumstance, to the store, is telling us where. Notice that Maya, on the other hand, is a participant. She's somehow affected by the action. Something is happening to her as a result of gave. Okay? Whereas I ran to the store, nothing is happening to the store. It's just telling us where the action happened. So objects are participants in the action. They're affected by the action. If this isn't clear to you, please do send me an email because I want to be sure. It's kind of an important point that you be able to distinguish direct objects and indirect objects from things that are not objects. Finally, one of the activities in the wiki asked you to look at gerunds, infinitives, past tense verbs. Again, a lot of good work on this, and I think there were still a number of questions. I'm going to put some links below this video, the Purdue OWL link that explains a bit more, gives some more examples of gerunds and infinitives. I'm sorry, and participles too is what I meant to say. As well as some exercises. I'll give you some links to some other exercises below too. Okay, enjoy this week's work, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with.